and welcome back. We are now going to start the last session of plenary proceedings for today. It's a panel discussion that is going to look at why science knows no border and why well-established partnerships matter more than ever, and also to what extent can science operate away from politics. So a very important topic of discussion we have ahead of us, and I'm going to introduce the panelists. For just a side note, for the videos we just watched, if you want to watch them again, they are actually available on the multimedia space on the platform. Very good. So today, a coalition of UK and Swiss research organizations are launching a special initiative. They teamed up to launch the Stick to Science campaign. Today with us, we have a spokesperson who is with us on behalf of this coalition. This is Michael N. Gardner. He's the president of the ETH board. Michael, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. In fact, you're in very good company, since with you, we have the pleasure to welcome Elga Novotny, who is the former president of the European Research Council, Antoine Petit, as well, the chairman and chief executive of the French National Council of Scientific Research, or CNRS, and Robert Jan Smits, of course, the president of Eindhoven University of Technology, and finally, Lina Galvez Munoz, who is a member of the European Parliament. Thank you very much to the five of you for joining us this afternoon. I think, Michael, I will give you the floor first. The ETH board is one of the initiators of the Stick to Science initiative. Do you want to set the scene and let us know what the initiative is about and what is its purpose, and what do you and the other organizations involved in the initiative really wish to achieve with this campaign? Michael.
Thank you very much for your introduction. The Stick to Science initiative is an online campaign where we aim to call for an open and inclusive European research area. The whole research and innovation sector is currently alarmed for the future of science in Europe, as 1 year after the start of Horizon Europe, the full association of both the UK and Switzerland is still blocked because of political disagreements. This situation is extremely unfortunate, as advancement in research and innovation is best achieved when all actors can work together across geographical regions. This has never been more important than now, as the world faces serious global challenges, including climate change, biodiversity loss, and threats to food security. I think that the corona crisis has shown us in a very dramatic way how important scientific cooperation is. Joining our efforts, we successfully fought this crisis at a speed that would have been absolutely impossible had each country worked on its own. Scientific cooperation is also crucial for the development of new technologies, particularly in areas where there's geopolitical competition. We believe that ensuring European leadership, for example, in areas like quantum computing or maintaining competitive supercomputing capacity in Europe, will only be possible if we continue to work together and join forces. Allowing political differences to prevent scientific collaboration is contrary to the interests of society at large and puts at risk Europe's international competitiveness. That is the reason why politics should endeavor to support scientific collaboration, even when, or maybe I should say, especially when, the political environment is challenging. Scientific collaboration should build bridges. Barriers to scientific collaborations create only losers. Nobody wins. Ladies and gentlemen, scientific collaboration at the European level has a long history. It started after the end of the Second World War with the aim of bringing together European countries that, despite their diverse histories, language, and cultures, shared the same principles and values. One of the most successful examples of these efforts to promote scientific collaboration is CERN, which has an amazing track record, and this despite occasional political frictions between member countries. The UK and Switzerland are part of this history of European cooperation and have for many years been involved in pan-European research infrastructures, some of which are hosted in these two countries. I already mentioned CERN as an example. Today, however, Europe suffers from the delayed association of the UK and Switzerland to Horizon Europe. Scientific consortia that address urgent societal issues or develop critical new technologies, such as quantum science, face difficulties in taking full advantage of British or Swiss scientific know-how. Joint educational and training activities are also at risk, leading to a potentially long-term weakening of cooperations across the continent, to a potentially long-term weakening of Europe's competitive position in an increasingly polarized global world. European research and innovation actors have therefore started this pan-European campaign. We see it as a wake-up call for politicians in Europe to react now and to reach a prompt association of UK and Switzerland to Horizon Europe. Over the past few weeks, we have invited key academic and innovation leaders to join the initiative before today's official launch. The response to our call has been phenomenal, with positive answers coming from throughout Europe. More than 300 leading scientists and organizations, including a dozen Nobel Prize winners and Fields medalists, entrepreneurs, innovators, research and funding agencies, umbrella organizations, and head of higher education institutions, many of which today present, have pledged support for the campaign. We're very grateful that we can already count on the support of so many important actors. Today, however, our call goes further, goes out to everyone in Europe, everyone in the world. Now the whole scientific community, researchers, students, and citizens who share our values are encouraged to sign up on the website in order to express their concern and their support for scientific collaborations across the continent. Only if we put our heads together will European scientists be able to offer the best evidence-based solution to policymakers, will we be able to address the grand challenges before us. Doing the best science we can together is in the interest of us all and is the best way to serve our society. Thank you.
Michael, thank you very much. So I think we can now consider the Stick to Science initiative formally launched. So congratulations for that. I know the initiative has already received massive support within the scientific community. So you'll have to forgive me, but I need to ask you this first question. Clearly, the support among scientists is there. And although the message is meant to be keeping science away from politics, it is a deeply political message. So what is the plan to get out of the scientific bubble or the scientific community and address the message and reach the political leaders?
So the goal of the campaign is to raise awareness throughout Europe, not only within the scientific community, I think we are all convinced, but to address, in a sense, everybody, scientists, citizens, but also the media as amplifiers, and finally, of course, the decision makers, i.e. the politicians at the national and the European levels. The more people support our initiative, the more it's likely that there will be an in-depth discussion that can be held on this issue. And therefore, I call to all participants in today's meeting, today's conference, to also sign up on our website, sticktoscience.eu, and to spread our message in their institutions and on social media to invite everybody to sign up. Society needs to hold this discussion, and politics need to decide then what is in the best interest for this continent.
Thank you. And thank you for clarifying. So the target group or the people you want to reach with this initiative is pretty much everyone, right? Political leaders, but also the public opinion and scientists. May I open the floor to the panel? How does this message of science should know or knows no border resonate with you? Who wants to come in first? How does that whole initiative resonate for you?
Well, if I may start, is that okay?
Yes.
Well, as it has already been stated, the entire scientific community is behind it. So you don't have to explain anything to us. And the great challenge is how to get it out, and especially to convince the politicians that it's in the interest of Europe to separate and make an exception for science in the difficult political negotiations that go on for the after Brexit period, and that go on in the Swiss to get Switzerland associated. Now, I think one consideration that could be put very strongly for politicians is to confront them with what is happening right now. We hear every day, today we heard about microchip, the default in Europe to be able to produce its own supply of microchips, which is, of course, crucial for industry, for Europe's sovereignty. We hear about technological sovereignty. We hear about digital sovereignty. And there is this constant geopolitical tension that surrounds us. We speak about Europe not being autonomous in terms of energy supply through the Russian-Ukrainian crisis, et cetera, et cetera. So we are between the two dominant geopolitical actors, China and the US. And unless Europe is able to prove to the world and to its citizens that it can act as a continent, and research is the driving force behind it, they will fail. So I think this is one important dimension that I at least would put forward and confront politicians with what they want to achieve, some kind of sovereignty, European technological, digital sovereignty, independence in the supply chain, etc. And then just leaving science hostage to political negotiations. This does not square up.
So
May I follow up to
yes,
that? May I perhaps
Robertian,
add something to that?
Good. I wanted to come to you next. Please, go ahead.
No, I fully concur with what Michael and Helga have been saying. Well, today the CHIPS Act is presented in order to strengthen Europe's technological sovereignty. In order to do so, we need to mobilize the best brains of our continent, including the best brains in Switzerland and the UK. So it's essential, given the challenges and opportunities we are facing as a continent, that we work together and really forget about politics and really mobilize these best brains which we have on our beautiful continent. But there's also another element why I signed the petition, and it has to do with the following. Being associated to Horizon Europe also gives the countries, Switzerland and UK, a seat around the table to discuss the European Research Era. And also there's a lot of work to be done. We talk about open access, we talk about gender equality, we talk about academic freedom. And also there, the partners from these countries involved need to be around the table to build the European Research Area and to strengthen it. Holes are nice in Emmental and Stilton cheese, but we can't afford a hole in the European Research Area.
Very good. Robertian, you were, yes, Lynn, I'll come to you just in a second. I have one specific question for Robertian, because in 2014, you were the Director General for Research and Innovation at the European Commission. And in fact, a similar situation arose when Switzerland was excluded from Horizon 2020. But you were part, and Helga as well, you were among these persons who were really have been trying and succeeded to find a solution that resulted into keeping Switzerland in the first pillar in the ERC, in the first pillar of Horizon 2020. Are there any lessons that we've learned and that we can use, that we learned back in 2014, that we can use today?
Well, what we did at the time, I went to President Barroso and his cabinet and made it quite clear that we should not politicize science. And I also told him, because there was a major crisis, perhaps not to be compared with the one at the moment with Switzerland, but still was a big crisis over the Croatian protocol, which Switzerland did not want to sign. I said to him as well, if you stop all cooperation in all different fields, I mean, you don't have a bridge of discussion. So let's keep the bridge of science open. And ultimately he agreed to that. He said, let's indeed stick to science and let's keep politics out of science. And that's something which I had hoped for now as well, that the politicians in the countries concerned would say, let's forget about, all the different elements we have and problems we have, certainly with regard to science. Let's keep the bridge open. And science diplomacy is something which is an ideal tool to make it clear that whatever happens, scientists can work together in partnership without borders and beyond borders.
Thank you. Lina, can I come to you next? You're a member of the European Parliament, a Spanish member of the ITRE committee, so the committee that deals with research and innovation. Well, the very first question I have for you is, to what extent do you think the science community can operate away from politics? You used to be a professor, you still have this
Yes.
academic background and hat on, but you're also a politician. So what do you think about science playing with or without politics?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this panel. I really appreciate it. Well, there are a few questions. The first one, I really believe truly that science knows no border, or at least it should not know any border. I think we will lose potential of people once we start limiting then, and the public needs to understand the fact that scientific research creates solutions, and if we have the chance to allocate resources for a cause that benefit us all, then we should. I'm a big fan of science diplomacy and how important it's to build that bridges. Of course, as Robert was saying, but I think it would be very, very, very unrealistic to think that the scientific community is free of political intervention. I mean, every organization who's depending on a budget coming from the public for our common resources is somehow affected.
Dina, this is actually a very important point. So I'll interrupt you here about the question about the budget. There is, for some reason, some people seem to think that when the UK, if the UK and Switzerland are associated, they will tap into the budget allocated to Horizon Europe. Is that right? Or, well, how does that work?
Sorry, yes. You are right. I mean, if UK and Switzerland want to be part of Horizon Europe, we know already that the UK Association Agreement is a work in progress, and the Swiss one is linked to the overall agreement managing the relations between Switzerland and the EU. I think it is important, as you have asked, to clarify that in order to participate in Horizon Europe as an associate country, the interested country, in this case UK and Switzerland, has to contribute financially to the program. So it doesn't mean that contributing that you will get that. Probably being both important countries in science production, probably the return will be probably more for the country itself, but for the science as a whole, which is the important thing we have to understand. Therefore, both the Switzerland and UK budget comes on top of the Horizon Europe budget. They will have to pay a financial contribution with the participation. The UK participation is estimated around 6.5 billion euro up to 2025, for example. And it is calculated that the combined collaboration of Switzerland and UK in Horizon Europe could bring more than 17 billion euros, and that is approximately 18 of the total budget. So more resources mean bigger opportunities for our scientific and innovation community. So I think I'll be very glad to see that as part of Horizon Europe, because I'm coming also from the academia side myself.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. I'm sure that that Swedes and British colleagues can also clarify the mechanics in the chat, in the Q&A, in the platform if need be, and if there are further questions. Well, I'm sure that there are some reference documents they can take a look at. Can we talk about science now, to all of you, and maybe to Antoine, actually, who's been patient until now? Do you feel that, let me rephrase, at the level of the CNRS, do you feel like the fact that, what have been the consequences, let's phrase it this way, what have been the consequences of the non-association of the UK and Switzerland to the Horizon program so far?
Thank you. So before answering your questions, I would like to remind people that scientists are not naive. Okay, so we know that political, economic, and industrial interest or questions of sovereignty must sometimes be taken into account. But I think really it's not the subject today. And also I think that many people, including scientists, disapprove of the Brexit. Should UK be punished after the Brexit? That's not the scientists to say. But preventing the association with Horizon Europe of UK and Switzerland is not a punishment for UK and Switzerland. It's a punishment for all of us. It's a punishment for Europe. If I dare, I could say that it is a sadomasochistic decision. And to come back to your point, we need to work all together. That fragmenting the scientific community in the context of major challenges such as health crisis or global warming that has been already mentioned does not make sense. It's really penalize European international scientific communities. And I would like to add that if we don't work with our colleagues of UK and Switzerland, since they need cooperation, they will try to find this collaboration elsewhere. I don't know where, but with other countries outside Europe. And so we will all lose this. So I really think it's not mainly a scientific question. It's a society question. It's a big mistake to not achieve this association. And I think that the scientific consequences will be bad for all of us. For France, of course, for CNRS, we have a lot of collaborations with our Swiss and UK partners. We will still have, even if the association is not realized, we will try to develop these cooperations. But if you look at the Horizon 2020, it's clear that UK and Switzerland are key partners for French institutions. So I think really European society needs this association, and it will be really a pity, and it will be very bad from the scientific point of view, but also, and I would like to emphasize on that point, because as we said, all the scientific community is convinced that association is needed. What is crucial from my point of view is that we have to convince all the others, and we will all lose if this situation is not corrected.
But Antoine, life goes on. So I want to challenge you a little bit. Your message is very strong, but life goes on. So you're probably missing some competencies that you were finding with partner organizations in the UK or in Switzerland. So how do you cope with that loss? Because there is a loss. 1 year into Horizon Europe, clearly, I'm sure that the CNRS must have found some alternative solutions.
Yes, of course. CNRS is the first beneficiary of European framework, and so that's not the question. We will still continue to develop collaborations with our colleagues. But as I said, UK and Switzerland are also key partners of CNRS within the European framework. And of course, we can develop bilateral relations. And perhaps we will even develop more bilateral relations than before, because we need them. But we also need to have multilateral cooperations. We need to challenge our researchers with the best researchers in every European countries, and that's clearly one of the role and one of the main advantage of ERC. So you're right, life will continue. We will still develop relations. Nevertheless, at the end, I think that the situation will be less good than if UK and Switzerland are with us. And as you said, it's not a question of money. The UK and Switzerland will bring their own money. It's really a question of competition. You can be the champion if you challenge yourself alone, but it's better to be a champion if you challenge your scientists with the best scientists all over the world and all over Europe.
Michael, what's the situation on the ground? We've heard about ERC researchers in some of the ETH in Switzerland whose grant have been covered by the Swiss government. How is it? Do you see researchers just leaving Switzerland because of the current situation? And I add to that before you respond. There's a question in the chat, and I am monitoring the chat, by the way. So if you want to ask questions, do please. There is a question that is maybe a bit too technical, but I'll still read it out. Is it possible to quantify the loss of UK and Swiss input to European science, for instance, in terms of publications and patents? You may not have these numbers, and that's absolutely fine, but just to relay a message that I think people want to understand the impact.
Thank you. The effect that we feel now is largely frustration, not being able to submit with our partners in areas where we have common challenges, and we think we could contribute to finding good solutions. Regarding the ERCs, also frustration not being able to submit an application, not being able to compete with the best in Europe. The analogy I like to take is from tennis. It's like if you told Roger Federer, you can't go to Wimbledon because you come from Switzerland. Roger can't do anything about that. He just is from here.
Luckily, he's vaccinated, so he should be able to.
Let's not go into that.
Okay, sorry.
It's just about the origin, right? And you can compensate that, right? The Swiss government now could say, well, you know, Roger, we'll organize a little thing for you, a little competition in Basel, perhaps. And if you win, you'll get as much money as you had won in Wimbledon. He's still going to say it's not the same visibility, it's not the same prestige. The ERC is really the biggest competition for talent, and it's Europe who managed to get it together. You know, we can really proud from that. So now, how much is the damage? It's hard to quantify, and it will be a progressive. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to keep these networks alive. And I think Antoine Petit has correctly said, people out of necessity will try to develop other networks. These networks might be good, individual ones might be better. I think on average they will be poor, and definitely the network, the toile d'araignée European, the European net will not be as tight, not be as dense, not be as efficient as the one we currently have.
I can perhaps add some figures from Eindhoven University of Technology.
Yeah.
In Horizon 2020, Marilyn, we had some 400 cooperation with the UK and some 200 with Swiss universities and companies. And this was all thanks to Horizon 2020. That was the glue which brought people together. If that glue is not there, you have to look for all kinds of ad hoc arrangements, and that's not good. So it will hamper cooperation big time, and that's why this needs to be sorted out.
You know, I would like to bring in another perspective, namely that of young researchers. For them, it is important in their scientific career to move outside their own home country. So where do they go? Many of them still want to go to the US, but I think we all have noticed that there is some kind of decline in the attractiveness of the US for reasons that are not necessarily only connected to science. It's the general climate. You have kids, you want to send them to a school, and you are told, you know, there has been shootings in the school, etc. So the US is losing attractiveness for young researchers. And therefore, it is all the more important that we facilitate for young researchers to go to good places in Europe, wherever they are, and to make real, Robert Jan was speaking about the European research area, and a lot needs to be done there. But if we want to have a European research area, the freedom of movement of young researchers is of utmost importance. And we are taking out 2 countries that are very attractive in terms of having excellent scientific institutions and say these are no-go zones.
Any comment from anyone else about the attractiveness of Europe? This is actually a very, very, very important point. Also because, Helga, in your earlier comment, you mentioned the strategic autonomy and the technology sovereignty principle. So it does look like Europe is kind of protecting itself from the rest of the world. So what does that mean in terms of attractiveness of the continent for foreign researchers or students, for what it's because that's also the case for students?
I think it was already mentioned quite clearly, I think, by all of us, that the enormous challenges Europe is facing as a continent, but also the opportunities with Fit for 55, the Green Deal, but also today the CHIPS Act was presented, the technological sovereignty. If we don't mobilize the best brains of our continent, the brains inside the EU, the brains in Switzerland and the UK, then we are not going to reach the objectives which we have set for ourselves. This is not the time now to be divided and not to bring scientists and innovators together. This is the time to really break down the borders and let scientists do their thing with a long-term perspective, beyond borders, and work on partnerships, which has always been the case.
But the issue here is that between the strategic autonomy principles or the fact that quantum and space, for instance, have been declared as sensitive areas, it's hard to look at Europe as a continent. So what does that mean for science cooperation? And how it's a little bit of what you mentioned earlier, both Helga and Antoine. Climate change and a COVID pandemic are global challenges. So how do we what does that mean for scientific cooperation? And how do we break the ceiling and tell political leaders, look, let scientists work together?
Well, I think regarding how to access political leaders, there's always a more open and formal way and an informal way. And science diplomacy, because it has been mentioned by several of us, has also, it's a two-pronged approach, because unless you are able to open channels that are informal, getting the message right to the people whom you want to address, just as Robert Jan was saying in 2014, you go to a person, you talk to a person, you do it informally. It's not a press conference or anything of this kind, but you talk to the right person and you use the right kind of language there. And then there is the other part, the public way how to approach it. And here I think it would be good to get industry, European industries on board, because microchips is a huge problem. And also, quantum computing, we are far away from industrializing quantum computers, but nevertheless, industry is very much interested in that. So I would strongly urge, the organizers of the campaign to think of this two-pronged approach, how to get the right channels informally open, send the right kind of people to those who are the ones who have a big stake in making the right kind of decisions, but also use the public space to get alliances. And I think in industry is one of the strongest voices to which politicians have to listen.
Thanks, Helga, because I think it's a very concrete recommendation that you're giving here, a piece of advice to the Stick to Science initiators. Michael, you seem to agree. What you and the partners have been doing to mobilize industry players around the Stick to Science initiative?
So we launched it today. So obviously we're not very far yet, Within Switzerland, we of course have prepared the terrain. So we have last week or 10 days ago, we launched a call to our Swiss people to sensibilize them. And that was a joint call of Swiss universities, the Swiss University Association, the ETH board, and the association known as Science Industries. So the science heavy industries, mostly pharmaceutical and so forth. We also hear, of course, from our partners in other countries, in Germany, the industrial alliances are also feeling the pain of not being able to have these cross-border collaborations. They also are starting to tell their politicians that they're unhappy about this, but we need to spread. I think, again, the logic of saying no borders, work together, resonates not only with scientists, but of course also with entrepreneurs, innovators, and companies.
What about the others? What do you think should be done in terms of mobilizing entrepreneurs and large industry?
I think it was clearly said by Helga to mobilize a broad audience, but there's more than that. The petition cannot just stay on the internet or being sent around. It has to be presented in hand, in person, to the key politicians involved. And these are the politicians in London, the politicians in Switzerland, and in Brussels. They need to be handed over the petition, preferably by Nobel laureates who have an enormous authority, and let these politicians then take their stance and let them then clearly say, yes, we will support it, or no, we don't support it. But I think it's very important, given the fact that so many people are supporting the petition, which is great to see. And once we have indeed also been able to broaden it by including the industry as well, by signing the petition, bring it in person to the politicians concerned and force them to take a stance. I think that's quite important then. And then we know exactly where they stand. And then we know exactly what is going to happen next.
Who should hand over the petition, you think, Robert-Jan?
Well, if I look at the list, there's a couple of Nobel laureates. And I discovered one thing. When a Nobel laureate knocks on the door of a politician, they won't refuse, they will open the door. And I see Helga smile, because she remembers very well what happened also in 2014. So my suggestion would be mobilize a couple of Nobel laureates who are also behind this petition and let them go to the capitals to make their statement and to hand over in person the petition. I think that's quite important.
Okay, Michael, I'm sure you're taking notes. Lina, you wanted to come in. I'm not sure if you're muted, but I'm not sure if we can hear you. Then Antoine, I'll go to you instead, and I'll go to Lina as soon as she's back with us. Are you here?
Sorry,
go ahead. No, that's fine.
Myself.
That seems to be a small lapse.
The first thing I would like is I would like to make a very, very general comment to say that politicians are normal people, and even some of us, we are scientists as well. So just to not separate it, and but my comment is regarding industry. So I think it's a good idea to involve also industry, but we have to keep in mind also that we have now industrial strategy within Europe, but we never had such an industrial policy. The industrial policy has been a country policy mainly, not a European one. So this is something that we have to keep in mind, that probably science is more at a European level, works more at the European level than industry, that is more related yet to specific country interests. And you said before that Europe is becoming protectionist more than the US, but the US has always been much more protectionist in many issues than Europe, or at least many European countries. So just this very general remarks, and that obviously I very much I will support obviously this this enlargement of the Horizon Europe very much. But just keep in mind that the industrialists, it will be great to have it on board, but the countries and industry in the different countries is a very, 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 very unequal position. So it's even more difficult to have a sort of unique European view on that.
Thank you. I'm sure that the Stick to Science partners are happy to hear so that they have a strong supporter inside the ITRE committee. Antoine, can I come to you just for a short recommendation? Especially, I mean, the CNRS is a member of the G6, right? Is there anything that you think could be done at that level? Or maybe not. Sorry if that's a bad idea.
No. That's a very good point. So just for everybody, G6 is an informal association of the CNR in Italy, the CSIC in Spain, and CNRS, of course, in France, and also 3 of colleagues association in Germany, Max Planck, Leibniz, and Helmholtz. And so we represent all together a good part of the scientific community. And clearly, I know that my colleagues of the G6 will support definitely this. And I think what we can do together is really to convince people. I mean by that I agree, of course, with Robert Jan when he said that if you're a Nobel Prize, it's easier to have an open door from the politician. But I think that politicians pay also a lot of attention to people. And it's important from my point of view to really convince people that we need collaborations. We have seen during the health crisis how data sharing at the global scale among scientists of every countries and exchanges of information have been instrumental. It's also true for global warming. So I think it's something that we should perhaps explain better, that even if science is also competitions, is part before all cooperation. And to not have with us our colleagues of UK and Switzerland, it's really a damage for science and for society. And so, it's something probably we should come with very precise examples of what we will lose if we don't have with us UK and Switzerland.
Very good, thank you. It is time to bring this session to a close. So Michael, I will just leave you the last words. What's next for the campaign?
Let me start by thanking the panelists for having joined us and for the great support we have received. So today was a launch of a call to all of Europe to work together, together with our colleagues, but also, as I said, citizens, media, industry. We want to convince political leaders in Switzerland, political leaders in the UK, political leaders in Brussels and in EU member states. Please help us work together. Please help us make together Europe stronger, more prosperous, and a better place to be for all Europeans. It's in our all best interest, and we want to help. We want to work together. Please give us the tools that we can help Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think if anyone has any specific questions about the Stick to Science initiative, there is a website that maybe my colleagues can put in the Q&A. There is also a dedicated booth in the exhibition space on the platform. So just go around or just go and tap Stick to Science in Google, and I'm sure you'll find all about it. So I'd like to thank very much the 5 panelists. And well, this is a close for today. The proceedings, the public sessions are going to resume tomorrow at 9 o'clock with the French Minister for Research and Higher Education, Research and Innovation, Frédéric Vidal. So we look forward to welcoming you again tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Thank you again for watching today's conference. Thanks again for all the speakers who were with us this afternoon, and we'll see you tomorrow.